Everyone, welcome to this discussion of Sally Morgan's My Place. Sally Morgan is a very important Aboriginal Australian writer. She is an author who has written her autobiography My Place, as well as plays or drama she has written, and she's also an artist. Morgan's works are on display in numerous private and public collections in Australia and around the world. The story of her discovery of her family's past, how she found out about her family's past. As a young girl, she did not know the truth about her family, but she then found out about her family. That is the story told in the 1987 book My Place, and it is a multiple biography, sold over 500,000 copies in Australia. It told a story that many people didn't know, of children taken from their mothers, slavery, abuse, fear, because their skin was a different color. This is not the story of one person. This is the story of many such children. Aboriginal children taken away from their mothers, put in a near slavery situation, abused, sometimes raped, and they lived in miserable conditions, all because their skin was a different color. Morgan wrote a second book, Vanamuraganya. It was a biography of her grandfather. In My Place, she talks about her mother and grandmother. Morgan has also collaborated with the artist and illustrator Bronwyn Bancroft on children's books, including Dan's Grandpa. Sally Morgan is the director of the Centre for Indigenous History and the Arts at the University of Western Australia. She has received many awards. My Place won the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission Humanitarian Award. That was in 1987. And the Western Australia Week Literary Award for non-fiction. That was in 1988. And she has also won the 1990 Order of Australia Book Prize. In 1993, international art historians selected Morgan's print Outback as one of 30 paintings and sculptures for reproduction on a stamp, celebrating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Did you get the points right? All right, then I'll move on. My Place by Sally Morgan is an Australian classic. It is an autobiography written by the artist about her quest for knowledge of her family's past and the fact that she has grown up under false pretenses. The book is a milestone in Aboriginal literature and is one of the earlier works in Indigenous writing. So we will see the details of what I said just now. What do you mean by quest for family's past? Morgan is born in Perth in West Australia. She and her siblings were brought up to answer questions about their color by saying that they were of Indian origin. Her mother and grandmother made them believe that they are of Bangladeshi origin or Indian origin. A strategy her mother and grandmother hoped would shield them from the racism of the schoolyard. Because if they say they are Aboriginal, they will be ostracized. They will be ridiculed and tortured, ragged. They believed that they were protecting the children by denying their aboriginal descent. They did not let, the mother and grandmother did not let the children, including Sally, know that they are aboriginal children. They have descended from the Palku or Baligu people of the Pilbara. But Sally's adolescence brought rebellion and stubborn questioning. She was not ready to accept the story that she is of Indian descent. She embarked on a relentless quest to find out who she really was. She wanted to find out who she really was. So she wanted to bring out the past. Despite the equally stubborn resistance of her grandmother Daisy refused to tell anything about the past. And the deep reluctance of her mother Gladys, she began unearthing the truth. Sally began unearthing the truth. Sally's grandmother Daisy had been born in Corunna Downs. That is the name of the original place. That is my place. This is the place that Sally finds out. Corunna Downs. It is a pastoral property owned by the Drake Brockman family. Her grandmother had been born there. Her great-grandmother was working there. Did you understand? Under the auspices of the notorious A.O. Neville, protector of Aborigines in Western Australia, she had been taken from her mother Annie, that is Sally's great-grandmother. Annie was a full-blooded Aborigine. Not half-blood but full-blood. And they lived at Corunna. Daisy, Sally's grandmother, ended up working for most of her life, unpaid except in kind. Daisy worked a lot, but she was unpaid. The Aborigines who worked were not given money. They were only given some charity. Kind. In kind means like food or leftovers, charity. She worked at Ivanhoe. Sally's grandmother, Daisy, worked at Ivanhoe, which is another pastoral property owned by the Drake Brockman family, same family. Daisy never married. And she never saw her mother again. Daisy was separated from Annie. Though she was able to have some contact with her brother Arthur, Daisy's brother Arthur, who came looking for her. These Aboriginal women had children of white men. They were not properly married or anything. Daisy's child Gladys was sent away from Ivanhoe. Daisy's child Gladys is Sally's mother. And she was sent away from Ivanhoe to another place called Sister Kate's. Sister Kate's is a home for children. Why is home put in a single quote here? Because it is like an orphanage or a place where children were separated from their mothers and not really taken care of. Gladys stayed at Sister Kate's. You know why the Aboriginal families were broken up or children were separated from mothers, etc.? Because this was like slavery. The whites did not treat the Aborigines like human beings. Gladys stayed at Sister Kate's until she was 15. And she and her mother expected that she would then be allowed to live at Ivanhoe. But Gladys was never allowed to stay at Ivanhoe with her mother. And then what happened? Gladys had to leave to board with a religious family who asked her to leave because she had gone to the sinful movies. By God, because she went to the movies, she was sent away from the family. She was not allowed to go back to her mother, Daisy, and she was also asked to leave the religious family. Then what happened to Gladys? Gladys is Sally's mother. She married Bill, a war veteran, obviously suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, with whom she had 5 children. Along with Sally, there were 4 other children. And Bill made their lives miserable with his drinking and violence. Bill had drinking and violence. And when he died, Gladys was left to bring up the children on her own, because her parents had no time for Bill's part Aboriginal family. Otherwise, when Bill died, Gladys would have to give up her children. This is the situation. But when Bill died, Gladys was allowed to bring up her children only because Bill's parents had no time for the children. That's a very terrible situation. This summary of her damaged family life was gradually revealed as Sally found out more and more. Nobody told her all these things. These damaged lives and their stories gradually came to light as Sally records her indefatigable attempts to give these women a voice. She refuses to be ashamed of her heritage. That is very important. She refused to be ashamed of her heritage. She wants to know it and be proud of it. But Daisy and Sally have had their whole lives disrupted by government policies. Daisy and Sally are the victims of government policies. They are the victims of exploitation. They are also destroyed by racist assumptions. So their reluctance to reveal their secrets is well founded. The horrible situation in which they lived led Daisy and her daughter Gladys to hide everything. And it is justified. When the mother Gladys finally tells her story, beginning with the bleak days at Sister Kate's, when occasional visits from her mother were cherished memories. Occasionally, Daisy would visit Gladys at Sister Kate's. That was a cherished moment. It is poignant indeed. It is clear how much they suffered. Separating kids from their families, that was a government policy, was perhaps not unusual for Australian pastoral families who routinely sent their kids off to boarding school. But Gladys was only 3 at that time, and it was very traumatic for her. When Daisy finally agrees to tell some, but definitely not all, of her secrets, finally Daisy is opening up a little bit. She amplifies Gladys' memories of the time. She's adding to the story more and more. Daisy had been an unpaid servant at the station, remember, Ivanhoe? And subject to laws requiring her to work. She had to be separated from a child because the law was that she should work and not look after the child. Daisy at that time had no say about the future of the child. She could not decide what the child should be, where it should go. And Daisy, remember, had been separated from her own mother Annie because she was a light-skinned one. That means what? Meaning that her father must have been a white man, not a tribal aborigine. Annie got pregnant from a white man, possibly. And she had been sent away on the pretext of getting an education. That is only a pretext. It is only to separate the child from the mother so that the mother can work. And also, they will not have any feelings for the family or feelings of rebellion. They won't have needs. They will just work. Only when the servants or slaves have families will they want more. That is the trick. And this education turned out to be training as a domestic servant. Ashamed of her illiteracy, whose illiteracy? Daisy's. Well into her old age, she could not read or write. So there could be no exchange of letters or correspondence between Daisy and Gladys. So Daisy never got to know how Gladys was getting on at Sister Kate's. It was very difficult for Gladys to communicate with her mother Poor Daisy had no money either. You know why they are not given money? So that they won't run away, so that they won't have any needs. They are made to live in deprivation. They are made to rely entirely on their white families. So she was entirely reliant on the Drake Brockmans to give her leave and transport to make any visits. So they would decide when she will visit her child. All these are very shocking things if it happens to white people. But when it happens to Aborigines, it is like slavery and nobody cares. And knowing that her separation from her mother had turned out to be irrevocable must have had her anxiety and distress even harder to bear. She knew that history is repeating. For Sally, the mystery of her mother and grandmother's parentage is a scab or a wound or a scar that must be unpicked. She can't touch it. It is hurting. Neither Daisy nor Gladys knew the identity of their fathers, and there are conflicting stories. The Drake Brockmans claim there was a Maltese man called Sam, but when Sally picks up the trail from the old people in the Pilbara, they say it couldn't possibly have been him. So they don't know their fathers. For the first time, Sally suspects the reason for the women's shame, sending her to old photos of Howden Drake Brockman, where she saw a resemblance that shook her identity to the core. It is kind of obvious that the mother was raped by Howden Drake Brockman, and probably he is the father. So this is an autobiography with elements of a detective story. Like a detective story, she is finding out her past, hunting out her past. It presents the author's quest for knowledge of her family's past. She is finding out details of her own life one by one. You know, for a white person, for an ordinary person from the mainstream, the first thing that you know is your own past. But here is a community that has lost its past, where people do not know who they are, who their fathers are. I am reminded of Sharan Kumar Limbale's Akkarmashi. Very close connection between that situation and this. And here Sally is growing up under false pretenses. Mainstream white critics have criticized the book for its melodrama, but like Sharan Kumar Limbale said in Towards an Aesthetic of Dalit Literature, you can't judge an Aboriginal text or experience based on mainstream parameters. There are many responses and controversies also related to this work. Here is one. The enormous response by white Australia to my place lies somewhere in the attraction to something forbidden. You know, the whites are all thinking they are very different from this. Their life is so great and ordered and structured and moral. And they are reading my place with the understanding that, yeah, we are sympathetic to the Aborigines. We understand them. We care for them now. We are not like that anymore. With these pretensions, they are attracted to my place because of the attraction to something forbidden. There is a kind of voyeuristic pleasure in knowing what happens in Aboriginal lives. The apparent investigation and revelation of that forbidden thing through style and family history. This is the trap in all Dalit or subaltern literature also, because the mainstream readers are attracted to it because it shows the other, the forbidden other. It recasts Aboriginality, so long suppressed, as acceptable, bringing it out into the open. The book is a powerful depiction of all that has lied dormant, and the book is a catharsis. It gives relief and release, not so much to Aboriginal people oppressed by psychotic racism as to the whites who wittingly and unwittingly propagate it. So, this is a very important text that everybody should know, Sally Morgan's My Place. I hope you enjoyed this discussion.